Hello, this is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I am doing a Friday Reads today. Yay, it's been a while. I've finished, I think, 4 books that I can talk about right now. One of them was 900 pages, so that's like 3 books there, right, in one volume. Anyway, I want to talk about what I've read and what I'm reading. Hello, what's up? It's been a while. Am I allowed to talk about Victorian literature if it's not October? Because it took me about 6 weeks to read my first book that I'd like to talk about, which is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading talked about this book maybe last year or whenever she talked about it before, and it really compelled me to want to read this book. And so I thought that would be my Victober book, and it turned out to be a book that I read all the way into November. But like all Dickens novels, like all great Dickens novels, you have to embrace the great things about Dickens novels with the sometimes not so great things about Dickens novels. And so I have a list of what I'm calling praises and peeves about this novel. Overall, I think I gave it 4 stars. It was a really compelling read. There were 3 chapters in this book that blew me away in terms of plot and just in terms of Dickens' writing. So that was really cool to read to get into those 3 chapters. And there were a lot of other good things along the way and really compelling characters. And then the peeves that I have also involve characters that meander. There are a couple of characters when I see that they're going to be the focus of the chapter, I'm like, geez, because they talk in riddles and there's way too much dialogue revolving the characters. So anyway, let's get started. Dombey and Son is about a man who has a daughter, and his wife is giving birth in the very first chapter to a son. She gives birth to the son. He is overjoyed, the father is, because he doesn't really like his daughter. She's, I think, 4, maybe 4 or 5, or she's young, and he has never wanted anything to do with her. She's not a boy, after all. And so he has this new baby, and of course, immediately the wife dies in the first few pages in childbirth. And so they're scrambling about who is going to take care of this baby. And poor Florence, who is the little girl, isn't even told for months that her mother has died. No one pays any attention to her. She is cast aside to a dark wing of the mansion because they are very, very wealthy. He owns a counting house. And the story goes from there. Eventually, Florence is allowed to be around her little brother, Paul, and they form an intense, incredibly rich sibling bond. Paul himself, little Paul, is sickly. He is an invalid a lot of the time. He is very small, and he has the soul of an ancient mariner. He is very attuned to people and to his relationship to nature, and he lives in a dream world of his own mind much of the time, and he loves his sister, and he tries to respect his father, and he is sent to boarding school because they need to toughen him up a little bit and get him ready for the business world, and he's quite young still. And he needs to go to the seaside because he's sickly, and he needs to be exposed to the sea air and whatever little sunshine they can eke out in England at the time. And so Florence is allowed to go also with her maid, who is fantastic. Her name is Susan. And she lives in a boarding house down the road, and she is allowed to see Paul. And anyway, they form this incredible bond. And then the story goes... This is about a third of the way in, and it takes a tragic turn. And then we see what happens to the characters after the fact. After the fact of the tragic turn, Dombey, Mr. Dombey, marries a woman, and it doesn't go well. Let's just say the marriage doesn't go well. She is not at all enthused about the marriage. She is beautiful, she is proud, and she is incredibly poor. And she is essentially urged to marry Mr. Dombey from her mother. And I don't want to give away the spoilers that go on from there. So it's an incredibly complicated, character-laden, relationship-driven story for the most part. You care deeply for Florence. You care deeply for her maid, Susan. You care deeply for some of the other characters. And then you are terrified by the villain of the novel, who is named Mr. Carker, who works for Mr. Dombey in the counting house. And Mr. Carker is described as having a lot of teeth, that he always smiles and shows his teeth maniacally all the time. He's always smiling, but no one really feels any real warmth. He's not smiling with his eyes. That's his grimace almost. And he has a lot of plans and devious, dubious things that happen throughout the course of the novel. And so it all comes together, of course, in the end, as these novels always do. But I enjoyed the journey. As I said, there were the endings seemed to be cobbled together too easily. That happens in most Dickens novels, I think. There are lots of chapters of just this meandering, non-important dialogue that are supposed to build the characters, but it feels like the most important characters get the least amount of dialogue, and the meandering kind of sideline characters who are supposed to be the comic effect, they get the most dialogue. And so I did kind of grimace myself as I was getting to some of these meandering chapters. But you know what? I persevered, and I just kept going on, knowing that I wanted to see what was going to happen in this novel. And I wasn't disappointed. As I said, the ending did seem a bit pat, but all in all, yes, it was excellent. And so I really enjoyed it. If you read novels in October or outside of October that are Victorian, I recommend it for quite the ride. Another book that I finished, I read as a buddy read with Sean, the book Maniac. It's L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between, and this was excellent. At it's called the prologue. It's not really a prologue, but the first chapter of the book, we get to meet this character named Leo, who is in his 60s, and he is opening a diary that he kept in the year of 1900 when he was I think 12 years old, and the things that are in this diary jog his memory. And so he tells us this incredible story about an interlude that he had in the summer. Well, it was more than just the summer. It was him in boarding school, and then him being allowed to go to a grand family's estate with his friend from school for the summer. And it's in 1900. And Leo is such an interesting character because when he was a child, believed that he had the ability to cast spells on people. And when this is at the very beginning in the first chapter, he is being bullied by two boys in his boarding school, and he casts a spell on them. And there is a tragic consequence. Nothing that he did physically, but he feels that he caused them harm by this spell. And so he's very, very drawn to especially astrology and creating his own kind of language and his own spells. And so he's kind of really wrapped up in his own imagination. And his father has died, and his mother is a little bit clingy. And Leo, the summer before, had been an invalid. He got some kind of disease. I don't remember if they said what it was, but he was in bed for like the summer with maybe diphtheria. I think maybe diphtheria. And so he's a little bit sickly. So his mother is worried about sending him away to this family. But the family wants their son to have someone to, be a companion during these summer months. And Leo gets sucked into this clandestine relationship between the Marion, who is like, I think maybe 20 or something, and she is about to become engaged to the Viscount, but she is having an affair with a farmer. And so the farmer and Marion and the Viscount himself all use Leo to facilitate messages. You know, they didn't have phones. They couldn't text each other where to meet for these trysts. So they use Leo. And in the process, Leo starts from this pretty innocent, rambunctious, silly boy into being suddenly aware of the world of adults and their physical relationships. And so, and it takes a while for this to go through. And he goes through this whole psychological process getting there. And the writing was so good. And you really felt, because it's being told through 60-something-year-old Leo's story. He's the one telling the story. Leo, young Leo, is not telling the story because this isn't the diary. This is Leo reinterpreting himself from the past. And so he has the foresight, is it the foresight? That's not the right word. He has the hindsight to understand what the implications of all these things were that he weaves into the story. So I don't know if you would really have enjoyed a story told by young Leo right from his mouth. So it wasn't like a first person from young Leo. It was first person from old Leo. And it was just brilliant. The characterizations, the set pieces of sporting events, and just the dichotomy between the upper class and them mingling every summer with the lower class to have a cricket match because they want to prove that they're not snobs, although they are incredible snobs, and they reinforce the class system. And Leo is definitely not in their class, but he is slightly above the class of the workers on the farm and in the village. So he is caught in the middle, literally, in all these different ways. And it was just such a good, taut, stressful, and well-written narrative about this boy. So really enjoyed it. I know I listened to Sean's Friday Reads last week, and he was talking about the epilogue and should there or should there not have been an epilogue. And, I was actually fine with it, but I was 50-50 on it. I did not think that the epilogue as it was written was really necessary to the story. I don't really know that it added anything to the core narrative that I was really enjoying. And in fact, it seemed too preposterous to me. But nevertheless, that's how it was written, and we had a really good buddy read, just reading a few chapters a week, and it took several weeks so we could just, enjoy it as we were reading. So this was a great book, and I'm so glad we read it. Another book, let's see. Another book that I read earlier before I finished those other two books was The Logger Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Stradal. And this was written, he wrote a book called The Kitchens of the Great Midwest before. That was the first novel. And I think he's writing as an older person. I think he has a late in life career or middle-aged career or something, where he's writing about food and about restaurant culture and different things in these novels taking place in the Midwest to capture a time and place. They're historical fiction in a sense, especially The Logger Queen of Minnesota was about the beer industry and how it got, how loggers and small family breweries, took off in the 50s and on until they were kind of crushed by the IPA craze later on in the 2000s. So it covers a bunch of decades. It starts out with two sisters, and through the kind of deviousness of one of the sisters, she ends up inheriting the family farm and the estate, which, when I say estate, it wasn't a huge amount, but enough to get her started in helping out her husband's family's failing soda pop business and turns it into a beer empire, kind of. And the other sister, Edith, is left with nothing. She is given nothing out of the money, and they stopped talking to each other because of it and didn't speak anymore. They didn't have a relationship. Both of them were too stubborn to reach out to the other. They kind of just both felt it was too late. And So we've got that storyline going on, and mostly we're watching them live their lives, one with much better financial fortune than the other. And then there's a tragedy in Edith's family, and she ends up having to take in her high school granddaughter after the tragedy. So then we start following, and her name is Diana, and we start following Diana and her entree into the brewing business, not through her aunt Helen, but through other means. And so she also loves the brewing industry, but on the IPA craft brewery side. So it's basically, watching an industry through the lives of this family. And I thought it was very well done. I like books that are like middle class, working class books. The writing is not ornamented. It's very straightforward, just like the characters themselves are very straightforward, stubborn to a fault sometimes, earnest and stiff upper lip, and not ever wanting to complain about their plights, and keeping everything very close to the vest and not being emotional. So that's kind of how the writing is too. And I just thought it was really interesting. And there is one book left, I think it's called The Lakeside Supper Club, that I haven't read, but I'm definitely going to pick it up at some time because I did enjoy it. The last book I want to talk about, I just finished last night because I could not go to bed till I finished it. It's a book that's not coming out until next year. I got an ARC of it. It's called Cloistered by I was going to talk about 4 books, but I think I will just talk about the 3. The 4th one that I just finished last night was a book that won't be coming out until March, and it's nonfiction. So I did want to talk about it for Nonfiction November, but it's a memoir about a woman who was born in 1960, and when she is in her early 20s, she decides to become a Carmelite cloistered nun. And so it's the story of her conversion to Catholicism, and then her entree into the convent, and thinking so much about her journey there. And then the dynamics of the convent change when the Mother Superior dies and another woman takes her place. And so the dynamics kind of mess everything up for the entire sorority of the sisters. So, but it's a memoir, and I really enjoyed it. I think I'll talk more about it because I really have a love of books about nuns, and especially if they're in convents for some reason. I am not Catholic. I have no religious background at all, but I am really drawn into stories about people who choose to withdraw from the world, as she did in this memoir. I'll put a GIF of the cover here, but I can talk about it more because I was thinking of Rumer Godden's novel In This House of Bread, which I had learned about some of these things from that novel. That was also a British convent. This was a British convent. So I think I might talk more about it when the publication date of this memoir comes out later. So I think that's all I have to talk about for now. Right now, I am still reading The Bee Sting. I am just about a third of the way through. I kind of had to stop reading it because of the Dombey and Son situation. It was very hard for me to balance 2 very long novels at the same time, so I quit reading it for a bit. I'm back at it now. It's a great story, really well written. I'm really enjoying that. And I'm reading a book of very short, weird pieces of writing by Peter Orner about kind of pulling memories from his childhood into his interpretation of other books he's reading. But they're very short. Like some of them are just like a page or 3 pages or something. But I like Peter Orner's writing style so much. A few years ago, I read a book called Maggie Brown and Other Stories, which is his latest short story collection. And I thought he just really handles characters and a sense of the Midwest, Chicago and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I believe. I can't remember all the places that he talks about, but I think those are places where he's actually lived, and he has a really good sense. And I think he uses a lot of family as inspiration for the stories he's writing. And sometimes the writer, like in Maggie Brown and Other Stories, some of the connected short stories were all about a writer. So there's a family connection there, but I think he's really transformed whatever happened in his family into really compelling fiction. So that's interesting. I like writers who write about other books and about themselves. And it's kind of a hybrid, weird little collection. But I would like to read more Peter Orner, maybe some of his backlist, because I just like his voice and what he's doing with his work. I think that's all I have to say for right now. I'm definitely going to be doing something for Remember December, and I'd like to do a video about that separate from this, because I have a couple of neat ideas for some of the prompts, but I can't do that right now. I've got to get through Thanksgiving, you guys. That's my update. I've been talking for a long time. I'm hoping to cut a lot of this out, and thank you so much for watching. If you got all the way through, please tell me if you've read any of these or you have anything to say, or just say hi, or just like Kelly says from Books I'm Not Reading, just put an emoji. I'm glad to see you here, and thank you so much for subscribing and for watching my channel. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.